I did everything right and they indicted me.
And I don't know what the I'm doing. Antifa!
Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Katie Halper Show. We are so thrilled to be here with you. We are going to jump right into our first interview. We have a great lineup, but our first interview is with none other than Representative Khanna of California. So we are going to bring Representative Khanna right onto the show because we have less time than we thought we would have. And then I'll make all sorts of boring announcements about how you should give the show a like, you should subscribe, you should become Patreon supporters, et cetera, et cetera. So welcome back to the show, Representative Khanna.
Thank you. Always a pleasure to be on.
Thank you. Yes. And I appreciate your time because we know how busy you are. And we have a lot to cover in the next 15 minutes. So we have the political earthquake this week in Michigan, the Democratic primary, the underreported attempts to more closely integrate U.S. and Israeli intelligence mid bombing campaigns against Iran, and still in Gaza post ceasefire, along with your widely covered recent trip to the West Bank and the harassment and detaining that you face by Israeli settlers. So, Congressman Khanna, welcome to the show. That's your real intro.
Thank you.
So, as the New York Times reported yesterday, there is a push to undertake, quote, a far more integrated defense and technology partnership built around legally mandated defense industrial cooperation between the two nations, speaking of Israel and the United States. Both the House and Senate have included such a proposal in the annual defense policy bill, laying the groundwork for melding, Freudian slip, U.S. and Israeli defense and intelligence capabilities in profound ways that some critics find alarming, end quote. You are one of those critics, Ro, I imagine. What should people know about the development and what do you find alarming?
I was one of 3 people in the Armed Services Committee to oppose the Section 219. That would basically be an end run against the Leahy law in foreign sales. You now basically are saying that Israel and America can jointly produce all these weapons. So you don't even need Congress. Once there's a memorandum of understanding, if there's joint production, we are integrated with the Israeli military, and our elected officials lose the power to really change that. So we need to strip this out of the National Defense Authorization. When the American public wants us to do with less with Israel, only the United States Congress would say, let's do more. But this is a Netanyahu ruse to say, okay, we don't want the aid, but let's just have joint production on the weapons.
And what kind of increased integration is this? Because as many people have pointed out, they're already quite integrated. So what makes this new?
Well, this has a joint task force, joint commander on key technologies. Now, it starts out with a few $100 million, and some people are for it, say, oh, this is not saying that we're going to all co-produce all the weapons, but it creates the framework, which then can be expanded on. And you could add almost every weapon system to it.
Right. So do you think that AIPAC, by the way, well, let me ask you this first. So switching gears, although it's related, Michigan, obviously this was shocking to some people, disturbing to some people, but there was that primary election of Abdul El Sayed, despite being outspent by some accounts 11-1 by AIPAC and related pro-Israeli dark money PAC. So is this a bellwether race? And what do you think it's signaling about where voters are going and how it is being received? And how is it being received in Washington, D.C.?
It's a historic race. It changes the face of American leadership. First, it's a Muslim American who has won a statewide race in a swing state. Let's not underestimate that. That's giving people of minority faiths, brown and black kids around America, the sense that they can do anything. And it's someone who won on an unabashedly progressive platform. No foreign wars, no aid to Israel, Medicare for all, a willingness to tax billionaire wealth. And so this is showing that the progressives can win. I mean, the knock on progressives was always, oh, can you win in swing states? Well, yes, we can. And the energy of the party is with us.
Right. Now, do you think, by the way, on a related note, that AIPAC should be forced to register under FARA, the Foreign Agents Registration Act?
I do not. I don't take any money from AIPAC, and AIPAC has attacked me, I think, more than any member of Congress. But my view is that these are American citizens who are advocating for a viewpoint that I strongly disagree with. I don't take any money for them, obviously. I banter with them or parry their blows all the time. But I still would meet with people in my district who I know they're American citizens. They're hardworking. They don't vote for me. But if they reach out, that's their right. That's a democracy. And, I go everywhere and talk to anyone in the pursuit of practicing democracy.
Okay. Well, because we don't have as much time as we had wanted to, I'm going to have to insert some clips later because you very bravely went on a fact-finding mission last month to the occupied West Bank, and you were stopped by Israeli settlers, and you were detained. And we're going to insert video of this happening and you talking about this. But around that same time, you did a very viral interview with Jeremy Scahill at Dropsite News.
Yeah.
And you maintain that Israel should still have access to U.S. weapons, though limited to defensive weapons. And again, this caught the attention of a lot of people. So I want to know, do you maintain your position that Israel should have legal access to U.S. weapons after and while they're committing what you've called a genocide?
Well, what I said is zero aid, zero military sales that are weapons used to kill civilians. I'm a co-sponsor on the Stop the Bombs Act. I've supported all of Senator Sanders' amendments. But the question I was asked is, would you have a global arms embargo on Israel getting Iron Dome? And I said no for two reasons. One, I don't think America should be enforcing it. Like, are we literally going to be stopping other countries from selling Israel Iron Dome? That's getting into a foreign entanglement. And secondly, there are Israeli lives there and American lives, 700,000 Americans, and I'm for protecting civilian life, whether that is Palestinian, whether it's Indian, whether it's Jordanian, whether it's Israeli. But what I have clearly said is that I'm opposed to any military sales to kill civilians, and I'm opposed to all aid.
But I mean, I understand the defensive nature in theory of the Iron Dome, but given that you yourself have said that they are committing a genocide, isn't, like, if you use an analogy, like a guy who is stabbing people, walking down the street, stabbing people, if we give that guy a shield, even if it's defensive, like, we are now complicit in his criminality, right? So isn't that what we would be doing? Selling the guy a shield to continue the analogy?
I believe that the Israeli government has committed a genocide, but that doesn't mean that the 700,000 Americans living there or the Israeli civilians living there, including Israeli Arabs, should suffer death if their missiles launched there. And I also don't understand what the U.S. would do in terms of, like, would we want to have American warships basically trying to block any missiles from coming into Israel? I mean, I don't think we should be going into wars over this. I think we should be pushing for a peace process, and we should be recognizing a Palestinian state. We should be stopping our aid. Today, Yonah Levy was indicted. His group is the one who detained me. We should be calling for extremist settlers to be arrested, destroying outposts. There are a lot of things that we can do that would, in my view, have an immediate impact on Palestinian lives.
Okay, but speaking of Palestinian lives, another thing that was very controversial, or that you and Jeremy got into, was the right of Palestinians to self-defense and the right of Israel to self-defense. So obviously you see the Iron Dome, right, as a defensive measure. But, what about the right of Palestinians to resist an occupying military?
Well, what I've said is we should recognize a Palestinian state and have a Palestinian state without Hamas, and recognize a Palestinian state, which in West Bank there isn't one. We'd have consular services, and then the Palestinian state would have the right of self-defense in accordance with international law, like any other state of the 193 countries we have. And that, to me, seems that Palestinians would have the same rights as Chinese, Indians, Americans. But what we first need to do is recognize a Palestinian state, which I think the next American president should.
So I hear that, but and I think, I think one state is obviously the ultimate goal, but I know that some people think two states to get there. And you may not think one state is the ultimate goal, but the thing is that a lot of people don't seem to recognize that, and you can judge this as good or bad morally, but in terms of like legality, so you have the UN General Assembly Resolution 3743 and other resolutions which affirms, quote, the legitimacy of the struggle of peoples for independence, territorial integrity, national unity, and liberation from colonial and foreign domination and foreign occupation by all available means, including armed struggle. Now, I want to point out, as long as they follow international humanitarian law. So, in other words, they can't, in the name of fighting that occupying power, kill civilians, right? But they are allowed in international humanitarian law to kill soldiers. So, what are your thoughts on this? I mean, do you recognize this reality, but just think it's not wise to pursue it, or did you know about this?
Well, I leave the international law for international law scholars. What I am talking about is how we get to a just peace. And in my view, we should, the most effective resistance is nonviolent, and that's what a lot of Palestinians are engaged in. But the most impactful is for an American administration to recognize a Palestinian state, to stop the aid to Israel, to stop military cells killing civilians, and then that Palestinian state would have the right to engage in self-defense in accordance with international law. And that, to me, is really the directive of people who are leading the country here in America. I let the legal scholars figure out the international law.
And what about BDS, boycott, divest, and sanction? Because a lot of people say, okay, they're not allowed to do nonviolent. I mean, they're not allowed to engage in armed resistance, even if it is actually protected by international humanitarian law. So what do you think of BDS, the boycott, divest, sanction movement, which obviously is nonviolent?
Well, there should obviously be sanctions on the settlements, on government officials advocating for settlements, on the banking and construction that is financing those settlements. And those are all things that an American administration can do. I also believe that there should be clear protections of free speech. And so someone engaged in BDS shouldn't be deported, they shouldn't be arrested, they shouldn't lose their jobs over their speech, and there should be protections for speech.
Okay. Yeah, I agree with you on that. I guess I just don't get why you think that why Israel should have the right to respond to Hamas attacks, but Hamas doesn't have the right to respond to Israel's attacks.
Well, Hamas is a terrorist organization that massacred people on October 7th. And, I have would never ever justify what Hamas did. And I think they're not constructive to a Palestinian people. And I believe that what an American president should do is recognize a Palestinian state without Hamas and work towards giving Palestinians a voice. And that Palestinian state, I believe, would have the right to self-defense in accordance with international law. And I've called for the Netanyahu to be arrested along with Putin in terms of his violation of the ICC and committing a genocide in Gaza. So it's not like I give the Israeli government a pass for what they've done. I'm saying that they need to be arrested and held accountable under international law.
Right. I mean, I would say that, Hamas was, they've been accused of war crimes for sure, as has the Israeli government. And I don't defend like any war crimes, but they have been the government of Gaza. Of course, no one pays attention to this. I'm not talking about you, but it's insane to me that they've said time and time again that they were willing to give up governing. It was actually Israel that didn't want them to do that. But I do think there's a double standard. And I hope that, that there is, we also don't arm Hamas, right? So that's the other issue, is that I think that our response to Israel and to Hamas should be different, given that we are arming one side and not the other. And we constantly talk about how they're our allies. But anyway, so I think that, you and I obviously agree on certain things, disagree on other things, but I am grateful that you take the time to come on shows. And you are often credited with this. For coming on shows where you disagree. And when are you going to announce your presidential run?
Well, we'll see. We'll make a decision after Thanksgiving. But you know what I often say is I say the same thing, whether I go on a conservative podcast or a left podcast, I say what I believe. Now, sometimes I refine it, I change my mind, but I don't try to pander to the audience. And I think when people will say, not only do I go everywhere, but I am honest where I agree and where I disagree. And I think that's ultimately what's important, is people get a sense of integrity and taking stands of what you believe, as opposed to trying to just put your finger in the wind and appeal to groups and tell them what they want to hear.
Yeah. One more question. Do you think that Hamas has committed more war crimes, though, than the Israeli government?
I mean, I don't think there's some competition. I think that Israel has committed a genocide and that there should be held accountable, including Netanyahu. And I think Hamas is a terrorist organization that has committed atrocities, and not just October 7th, which is a terrorist attack, but other atrocities. And, they should be held accountable and shouldn't have any role in the governance of Palestine. Okay.
Well, thank you so much, Representative Khanna, for coming on, and hope you come back on to talk about more stuff. Thank you so much. Have a great night. Thanks. Okay, great. So we are going to bring on our next guest very shortly, and that is Craig Mokhiber, who is an international human rights attorney. He resigned, as people probably know, he resigned from the UN over its failure to hold Israel accountable for its ongoing genocide. But before we bring on Craig, we are going to play a very short video of Craig. So let us bring him on right about now. Let us start that video right now.
Metaphorically. Well, thank you very, very, very much. And let me say what a tremendous honor it is for me to be here with this assembly of truly extraordinary voices for justice and for the public good. I really don't take for granted these days the courage that it takes at this moment in history in particular, when powerful forces, not least the US government, are systematically attacking all who dare to challenge the empire's lawless tyranny, and all who dare to stand for truth when the truth is criminalized, and for justice when injustice is made the official orthodoxy. Voices like that of Jill Stein and Ali Abunimah and Medea Benjamin, all of whom I have admired for years and from whom I've drawn so much inspiration, and those of the Green Party organizers and candidates and activists who are here today from coast to coast and beyond. Your presence here today, at a moment when dissent and the truth itself are criminalized, is a signal to the world that you will not be co-opted, that you will not be intimidated, and that you will not be silenced. So I'm very grateful to be in conversation with you today. Well, we're meeting at a moment of extraordinary darkness, as has been well outlined by Ali. From Khan Yunis to Beirut, from Tehran to Havana, from the Mediterranean Sea to the Caribbean, and from New York to Los Angeles, there is a cloud descending on humanity. As I speak, a violent axis is rampaging across the globe, committing acts of serial aggression, destruction, and genocide, kidnapping leaders, stealing resources, destroying infrastructure, murdering innocents, and dismantling institutions of law and diplomacy. The two highest crimes in international law, aggression and genocide, perpetrated in broad daylight, day after day, month after month, year after year, over and over again, while the perpetrators boast of their crimes and arrogantly dare us to try to stop them. This is the US-Israel axis, a marriage made in hell, merging the arrogant lawlessness of US imperialism with the violent racism of Israeli Zionism, and the latest technologies of surveillance and murder with seemingly limitless impunity. And mark my words, if we do not confront it and stop it, that hell is coming to the doorstep of each and every one of us. Already today, the world is recoiling in horror as the Israeli regime, armed and funded and protected and accompanied by the US empire, rampages across Western Asia, leaving a trail of blood and destruction from the Mediterranean coast to the Persian Gulf and beyond. As it perpetrates genocide in Palestine, aggression, war crimes, and crimes against humanity in Lebanon, in Syria, in Yemen, in Iran, and beyond. Unlawful occupations in Palestine, Lebanon, and Syria, and assassinations across the region. As it corrupts governments and institutions from across the West, first and foremost here in the United States. as it persecutes human rights defenders wherever they dare to challenge the Israeli regime, its myriad crimes, or the deeply racist and fundamentally violent ideology of Zionism upon which it is constructed. And there is another assault happening as we speak, perpetrated by the U.S.-Israel axis with the complicity of its proxies and its Western sponsors.
Okay, we are going to leave it at that because we have the man, I was going to say in the flesh, but not in the flesh because this is virtual, but live in real time with us. And so we are going to bring him on to speak to us. Again, welcome back to the show, Craig Mokhiber, prolific human rights lawyer, thinker, writer, and advocate. Hi, Craig. How are you? Welcome back.
Hi, Katie. So good to be back with you.
Yes, thank you for joining. Wanted to know if you were able to, I'm not sure if you listened into that chat I just had with Representative Khanna, but if you had, what responses you had to it?
Well, it's great that Ro Khanna comes on to independent media in ways that most politicians in the United States are afraid to do. And it's great to see him on this show. It's great to see him speaking to the progressive community. I think all of that is very much to his credit. It's also to his credit that he's been so outspoken in standing up to the Israel lobby and to the Israel proxies in Washington, and I think defending the Palestinian people in very important ways. I think he is on a growth curve and a trajectory that is positive. I think he has a long way to go. I mean, imagine a situation in which U.S. politicians took the side of international law and international human rights instinctively and didn't look to carve out exceptions based upon the politics of Washington, D.C. So I think there, Ro Khanna has a little bit of a distance to go. I mean, to hear him say that, Hamas is a terrorist organization, so they cannot be armed and I cannot support them. But then in the same breath to talk about arming the Israeli regime, which is a genocidal apartheid regime that has for 80 years violated every norm of international law in the extreme. And that is, as we are speaking, carrying out a live stream genocide. For him not to be able to see let me use the word, the hypocrisy of that position, I think shows that he's got a bit more learning and a bit more growth to go before he can really be a representative of those people in the United States who want to see a foreign policy based upon equality, based upon human rights, based upon international law, and based upon some semblance of morality, not based upon the rules of exceptionalism that define politics in Washington, D.C. So, he's coming along, but we have to push him a heck of a lot further.
Yeah. Well, you both went to law school, so maybe you guys can do some, legal reading study group or something, and you can push him along on that.
I'd be very happy to bring him back to the law.
Yes. Right, yeah. And then maybe even I'll suggest that you guys have shared the stage, kind of, not at the same time, but maybe you could share a ticket. Maybe he'll have you as his running mate. Who knows? A girl can dream, as they say. But
no, thank you on that one.
Oh, okay. I actually wanted to ask you a little bit more about some of those questions because I'm actually shocked by how little airtime the concept of the right to resist gets from our media and our political elites. I mean, I'm not shocked, but I am shocked at the same time, just because Israel's right to exist is always invoked. I mean, constantly invoked. And yet the entity that has the right to exist and resist, that was a Freudian slip because they're not given the right to even exist, much less resist, would be the Palestinian people as an occupied people undergoing genocide. And I've asked you this before, but I think it's really helpful because I think a lot of people don't understand how you can prevent war crimes in other words, I've asked you this before, but the question is basically what is Israel allowed to do as an occupying power to protect its citizens? And what are Palestinians allowed to do as the occupied people to protect its citizens?
Well, Katie, this is why the United States has been such a vociferous opponent of international law as a construct. As you know, the U.S. government likes to talk about a rules-based order, which is something different from international law. It's basically that Washington makes the rules and everybody else has to follow along, and they are exempted from those rules, as are their closest allies like Israel. International law is very inconvenient for them because international law is very clearly codified and it's universal. It applies to everybody. And so universally allows for peoples who are fighting against foreign occupation, colonial domination, and racist regimes to use armed force to defend themselves. The Palestinian people have a right to take up arms to defend themselves from the Israeli regime. And that is not something which is in any way vague. That's very clearly defined in international law. It is denied by governments like the US and the Israeli regime. And the way they do it is through a sleight of hand, which is to declare that anyone who resists is a terrorist.
Right.
And in doing so, saying that they don't have any rights. And we heard Ro Khanna just do it there. Well, Hamas is a terrorist organization. That doesn't mean anything in international law. You have combatants and non-combatants.
Right.
You have lawful conduct and unlawful conduct among those combatants. And that's very, very inconvenient for them. Israel has no right to defend itself in the occupied territories. International law is very clear on that. Your remedy, if you feel that you are attacked, is to get out. And again, you've heard me before use the metaphor of a home invasion. If I break into your house and you defend yourself and then I kill you, I can't claim to have self-defense inside your house.
Exactly.
And international law works exactly the same way. So the Palestinian people do have a right of self-defense, but the Israeli regime does not in those circumstances. So, and in terms of the right to exist, you mentioned briefly the piece that I just published on this and some of the talks that I've been giving. Israel does not have a right to exist. The state of Israel does not have a right to exist. And the apartheid regime of Israel does not have a right to exist. The Palestinian people have a right to exist, and they have a right to self-determination. But Israel has no right to exist. No state has a right to exist. I said in that piece that when I joined the UN, there were a lot of states that existed that no longer existed when I left the UN. There were states that did not exist when I joined that came to exist subsequently. And no one makes the argument that apartheid South Africa or Mozambique under the racist regime or any of the dozens of colonial regimes that have been dismantled, that they have a right to exist in perpetuity. They do not, and neither does Israel. But Israel's claim to statehood is even weaker than that, because there are principles in international law that I point out in an article that say that, yeah, all states violate human rights, violate international law, violate humanitarian law. But if your very existence was created in a situation where violations of, you've heard this before, of jus cogens and erga omnes norms, the highest rules of international law, if those violations were central, not just incidental, but were necessary to the creation or maintenance of the state, then that state is not legitimate, effectively. And that other states in the world are obliged not to recognize it. And the reason that you never hear someone say Germany has a right to exist, Italy has a right to exist, Botswana has a right to exist, is because they are very insecure about the legitimacy of the state of Israel itself because of the way it's been founded and the way that it has been maintained in its conduct ever since. So they try to create an orthodoxy, which is a false orthodoxy that everyone has to swear to. And as I point out, in Germany, they're just passing a law now where you will go to prison if you say that Israel doesn't have a right to exist. A true statement. If you say it in Germany, you will go to prison. And already in German law, to become a citizen of Germany, you have to declare that Israel has a right to exist. You don't have to declare that Germany has a right to exist, but you have to declare that Israel, which is a false statement, Israel does not have a right to exist as a matter of fact or as a matter of law.
I think that is so crazy that it would be one thing. I mean, I oppose it no matter what, but it would be one thing if Germany required you to say, to be a citizen, that Germany has the right to exist. But it's so humiliating that they make a fealty and loyalty to another nation more of a priority, I mean, in theory, than to the nation that they are.
Well, there are two explanations for that. One is that they think they are making amends for the atrocities that they perpetrated in the Holocaust and during World War II by handing over that pain to the Palestinian people. And they are in the process doing something which is terribly anti-Semitic, which is equating the regime of Israel with the Jewish people, which is just false, and slanderous against Jewish people everywhere. So they continue their tradition of anti-Semitism. They continue their tradition of Islamophobia and anti-Arab and anti-Palestinian racism, and they continue their long chain in tradition of the perpetration and support for genocide perpetrated by the German regime in Namibia, genocide perpetrated against Jews and Roma and others in Europe, and now fully supporting the genocide of the Palestinian people. The German ruling class is nothing if not consistent in all of that, and it's very, very convenient for them to put all of those people over there and to say that somehow adding one crime on top of another crime washes their hands of the horrors for which they've been responsible. All they are doing is adding to their horrible rap sheet of crimes that have been on the record now for over a century.
Right. Yeah, no, that's really important. I mean, the way that I always think about how it is, of course, indeed anti-Semitic to conflate the state of Israel with all Jews. It's what Israel wants us to do. It's also ironically what anti-Semites have done, right? Like they use the term Zionist and Jew interchangeably, right? The Zionist this, the Jewish that. But I never thought of how it is a continuation of it. I mean, obviously, they're not gas chambers, and I'm not doing the ahistorical analogy, but it is interesting that is almost like their present day watered down version of it. And the real victims, though, of this for now are the Palestinians.
And the real perpetrators, meaning, the German ruling class, get away scot-free.
Right.
Once again, so impunity is the order of the day for them, the actual perpetrators. Impunity is the order of the day for the Israeli perpetrators. And another group has to suffer for the sins of the German class. And so, it's more continuation and consistency than it is any kind of surprising break with the past.
Right. Yes. Very well said. And, it's also funny because they're not doing Jews any favors when they do things like this, given that Israel is claiming to represent all Jews, and given that Germany is also making that conflation, and then they make this overt gesture of exceptionalism and special treatment towards this Jewish state. Like, do they not think how that could look for people who are going to feel resentful? And this is a very dangerous thing that they're doing. And again, I don't like it. This is so far down in the priority because right now there is a genocide of Palestinians. I'm just showing the rank hypocrisy of claiming that this is good for the Jews.
Yeah. Well, there's a kind of admiration amongst the right wing around the world, including in Germany, including in the ruling class, for Israel as an ethno-supremacist state that uses force to impose itself in ways that they can only be jealous of. And you get a lot of that as well. This idea that Israel is providing an example for far-right ideology, and that it is successfully, from their perspective, imposing its ethno-supremacist regime on others, the racial hierarchies with which the ruling class in Germany has always been so comfortable, and so supporting that comes rather naturally to them. They don't give a damn about anti-Semitism. This has never been about combating anti-Semitism. They don't give a damn about providing justice to the victims of the Holocaust. If it was, they would have given East Germany to them rather than somebody else's land, to the Zionist movement. This is about the ideology of Zionism, which is shared. Zionism is an official state ideology of Germany, not just of Israel. I would argue it's an official state ideology of the US government as well. And it's got nothing to do with Jewishness. It's got nothing to do with anti-Semitism. It's got everything to do with supporting a regime and an ideology that serves also the purposes of the ruling classes in places like Germany and the United States and the United Kingdom, obviously. We cannot let them get away with the smoke and mirrors. And let me just add one more thing to the righteous people in Germany who've been fighting against this genocide and fighting against the repression in Germany, who are being beaten to a bloody pulp. Yeah. German police in scenes that are truly reminiscent of the Second World War, simply for defending human rights and opposing genocide and standing up to the Israeli regime. The scenes that are coming out of Germany are absolutely bone-chilling. And you can see, you scratch a German security establishment, you find at least the roots of the Nazi past in that country, when you see the way that they treat their own people simply for standing up, let alone the way they treat migrants in that country for standing up, and especially the way they treat Muslims and Arabs and Palestinians who are trying to stand up against this genocide. This is a truly globalized genocide. And at the tip of the spear, beyond the Israeli regime, are the Germans, the British government, the US government, and their corporate partners in crime.
Yeah, what's absolutely fascinating and was very shocking to me. I mean, I've seen the absolutely disgusting. In fact, Brad, I'm going to send you some because I didn't anticipate this, but it's very important. I'm going to send you, Brad, some videos because I think it's important to show. But what really shocked me was that these videos of violent repression, I have to say, I'm not really shocked when they happen at Palestine marches, because we've seen such an impunity towards the suppression of people just literally, expressing their First Amendment rights or their freedom of assembly rights. But I was actually surprised, just even at the women's march, there was something, very, very brutal. And I didn't really think that you would see that. I thought it'd kind of be reserved for pro-Palestine marches, but I think it speaks to an example of how these things are never limited. They certainly are. I want to be careful because I'm not trying to equate struggles or the marginalization or the punishment of different communities. But I would say that maybe it is a reminder of how things don't stay segregated, like or discrete, right? So when people's rights are chipped away at or violated, or people are brutalized for one cause, it will spread to the rest of
This is why we say that the Palestinian people are on the front lines of a struggle that is defending all of our rights.
Right.
And that's why you see very clearly, we've spoken about the imperial boomerang before, that the kinds of atrocities that we have been sponsoring in Palestine are now coming home through ICE agents breaking down doors in the middle of the night and shooting people in the middle of the street. ICE agents whose agencies have been trained by Israeli law enforcement, who've gone on junkets to Israel. The same thing with the FBI, local law enforcement, the militarization of our police, all of that's been happening in Germany as well. And so there's that reality of it. It's also true that what is happening here in repression against people who are speaking out against the genocide is an extension of the genocide that's happening in Palestine. Those who are defending the victims in Palestine are suffering consequences, brutal consequences here in the West. That is an extension because the Israeli regime, its apartheid structures, and its ongoing genocide could not be sustained because it's a colony, could not be sustained without the Western metropole, without the Western support that it receives, especially from those three countries, the US, the UK, and Germany. And so the repression we're experiencing here is very much a part of that, although it compares not at all to the daily kidnapping and torture and sexual assault and murder and massacres and genocide that are being perpetrated against Palestinians on the front lines. But it is an extension of that. And it does not stay only within that movement of those opposing the genocide. It's being used against others. And power acquired by the states, by a state, is never contained. It is always spread anywhere in order to defend the power of the state and those behind the curtain of the state, who are the oligarchs and the billionaires and the lobbies and the donors who control mechanisms of the state. And we're witnessing that now all across the West. Even, the holy cow of the First Amendment of the US Constitution that American diplomats and politicians brag about whenever they go abroad has been just completely sacrificed in the name of the Israeli regime. And that drawback on free speech will not be limited only to those speaking out on Palestine. You see now Rubio and company expanding it all across the left and across those who disagree with the Trump administration at all on any policies. And everyone who thinks that they were going to ignore the genocide in Palestine and that it wasn't going to come back to haunt them, that they were going to ignore the horrific things happening to people in this country speaking out against the genocide, that it would never touch them, it will be knocking on your door very soon, and the time to stand up is now. It's yesterday, but there's no time like the present.
Right. And Brad, let me know when those videos are up, okay? But I have other things
Katie, I'm sorry to interrupt. I have one video that you sent, and that one's ready.
Okay, great. Yeah. So this is a video of a young woman at a Gaza protest in Germany. I mean, just look at how they are holding her. They're literally holding her by the chin, if you're just watching, by her face.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, that I could not.
Injuring her neck intentionally.
Yes.
I mean, the intentional cruelty of German law enforcement, it's very familiar. It's what we see in Palestine. It's what we've been seeing increasingly on our streets as well in the United States. And remember the crime that these people perpetrated. It's for simply saying Palestine or criticizing Israeli genocide or whatever. These are not people who are committing things that would be understood as crimes anywhere in the civilized world. And the brutality that has been unleashed on them is just absolutely stunning. And that's just one example that's been circulating over the course of the last week. But, the brutality and the beatings that we've been witnessing for the past 3 years in Germany, in the United States, in the United Kingdom, it's unprecedented in the sense that these are people who are opposing the crimes of a foreign regime, right, not even against their own government, right? Opposing the crimes of a foreign regime. And for doing so, are suffering this kind of brutality.
Yeah. And we've, apparently a disproportionate number of Jews have been arrested at these protests, which I just bring up to expose the lie that this is for, the safety of Jews. Right. Again, whenever I bring this stuff up, it's not because Jewish lives are more important than any other lives. It's just to poke a hole in their lie, which is that this is even about Jewish safety. And of course, it wouldn't be acceptable to kill, to deprive others' rights it wouldn't be acceptable to pursue Jewish safety while doing those other things. But it shows you that it's a lie from the get-go.
Well, that's right. It's very revelatory because that's been happening in Germany, in the UK, in the United States, the targeting of Jewish voices who have been standing up from the beginning to say this is not in our name and to oppose it. They are brutally repressed, which shows that this is not about protecting Jews. It's about protecting a racist and violent political ideology of Zionism. If you're a Christian Zionist or a Jewish Zionist or a Hindu Zionist, you're okay. But if you're someone who opposes this ideology and the conduct of this oppressive foreign regime, it doesn't matter what your faith tradition is, you are going to be targeted.
Exactly. Very revelatory, as you said, very revelatory and exposing and incriminating. So I wanted to ask you one more thing about our Roe Khanna discussion, which I'm curious about. I brought up the embargo, the arms embargo on Israel, which he thinks his position is that we shouldn't be supplying them with the Iron Dome, but we should sell it to them, or we shouldn't be blocking others from selling it to them. We shouldn't be blocking others, blocking them from acquiring it. And he was like, how would we even do that? I mean, what would we be policing the waters? I don't want to get into, I'm paraphrasing, but he was almost framing it as like an anti-foreign entanglement argument against having a blockade. But how does this happen? And how does an arms embargo get implemented in ways that aren't, I don't think, belligerent on an international level? Yeah.
It has happened. It can happen. It must happen. And this is another area where we need to bring Roe Khanna along.
Yes. Row your boat, row gently. Row that boat forward. Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Stop backsliding. I don't know if you can backslide in a river, but you got to roll down that river. So first of all, the idea of an arms embargo against the Israeli regime is hardly a radical idea. In fact, it has been effectively embraced by the International Court of Justice in its provisional measures on the genocide case and in its advisory opinion on the illegality of the occupation. It is a duty of all states under international humanitarian law to make sure not only that they are not arming a regime that is carrying out war crimes, crimes against humanity, ethnic cleansing, genocide, but to embargo those things. And there are ways that can be done. And that includes, by the way, this slippery little trick that liberal Zionists sometimes try to use, where they say, yes, no offensive weapons, but we will provide them with the Iron Dome or so-called defensive weapons. The distinction, by the way, is not as clear as people like to pretend it is. But also, you heard me say, Katie, that if somebody is walking down the street with a sword,
I stole that from you, by the way.
And you hand them a shield and they're massacring people with their sword, you are complicit. You are an accomplice in those crimes. And and so it is with Israel. The international community has duties under international law to impose a total arms embargo on the Israeli regime. And that doesn't mean these arms are okay and those aren't, or we won't give them, but we'll sell them to that regime. Those are breaches of international legal obligations. It could happen tomorrow. First of all, the U.S. could do it unilaterally. There's nothing to stop the U.S. government from saying, we're not supplying them, we're not providing them, and we're going to use all of our diplomatic and economic and other powers to make sure that no one else does.
Yeah.
And you could also
you don't have to invade another country to stop it.
No, you just turn off the pipeline.
Yeah.
Well, the other thing that you could do is you could support initiatives in the United Nations. And this doesn't happen because of U.S. and UK vetoes in the Security Council. So even if the U.S. doesn't do it, it could still happen. Because as I've said before in these discussions, you could have a so-called Uniting for Peace resolution in the General Assembly, and you could adopt a program of sanctions and a military embargo against the Israeli regime. All the governments that wanted to sign on, it wouldn't have to be 100%, could sign on to that regime. It could then be monitored, reported on, expanded by the General Assembly, and you could then isolate the regime, as was apartheid South Africa, as was the case with apartheid South Africa, and impose this embargo on the Israeli regime that would help to end its impunity, would help to reduce its belligerence, would help to reduce its capacity for genocide and serial aggression. That's not just moral. That is a legal obligation on the part of all states. And any government official, parliamentarian or executive or otherwise, any member of Congress or the State Department or anywhere else, who denies that is simply aligning themselves with the crimes of the Israeli regime. It can be done, and it must be done, and it's obligatory. It's just not being done, unfortunately, but that's what we need to keep pushing.
Yeah. And going back once more to the German discussion that we were having, which is related to this, obviously, but, it really proves that never again was not learned or applied. It's just been shifted. The population has been shifted. So maybe never again will they do this to, Ashkenazi Jews. But certainly they are happy to do it to other peoples, and including the people in order to pay it forward. They're like paying their genocide forward, German, with using Israel to do it. Yeah. And the people paying the price are the Palestinians, and paying with their lives. Yeah.
Never again, as a slogan, without universality, is a very old declaration of war and atrocity. The Germans under Hitler, they said never again because, one, they felt that German minorities that had become part of the surrounding areas were being persecuted, and they thought that they had been humiliated in the peace treaty, that left them, vulnerable and broke and so on. And so they said never again for Germany. That didn't help anybody.
Right.
Never again is a universal principle that means no violent racism, no genocide, no war crimes, no crimes against humanity ever for anybody. Exactly. And if you embrace only the first half of that and not the second half, you are no better than those who have perpetrated atrocities throughout the generations. And what a terrible thing to do to the memory of the victims of the Holocaust, to invoke their name and their suffering in order to perpetrate the same kinds of crimes on another people. That is the ultimate, it seems to me, disrespect for those who suffered in the Holocaust.
Right, yeah. And that's why I'm making this documentary, capturing the voices of these survivors who are saying never again is now, not the way Netanyahu means it, in the opposite way, and saying never again for anyone and not in our name. And, if we lived in a just world, these people would be, covered all the time by the media, and they'd be invited by politicians to speak. Instead, it's the people who are weaponizing a genocide to justify another one. And by the way, Craig, I got to show you this. So Mark Alberna writes, Craig Mokhiber for president 2028. I agree. So if Ro Khanna rejects my offer that I'm making on your behalf for you to be his running mate, to row him along that river of enlightenment and righteousness, you may have to consider your own run. I know it's going to be a change of plans because as of a couple minutes ago, I already told you you're going to have to run with Ro, but
that's it. It's you or me, Ro, or you and me. So you just let me know.
Yeah. Run and row. That's good. So shifting gears, Craig, I want to ask you about this story that just was reported on by Dropsite News. You think I'm like I don't get like commission when I mention them, but obviously Dropsite News is where Jeremy Scahill interviewed Ro Khanna. But Dropsite News published an article this week that reported on emails that were released by the hacker group Handala. These emails were from Yahav Lichtner, a UN official from Israel. And it displays the way that Lichtner sent Israeli diplomats UN reports, private briefings, and the like, some of which were confidential. And the article also notes that Lichtner is the director of UNICEF's Washington office. So what are your thoughts on this reporting as a former UN official?
Yeah, it's not a surprise, but it's horrifying. And by the way, I'm also going to plug Dropsite. If there are any of your viewers or listeners who are not yet following Dropsite, they are really missing out. It is an absolute treasure. The news and analysis provided by Dropsite, you're not going to get anywhere else. Some of the best investigative reporters, including Murtaza Hussein, who did this story.
Right.
You're not going to find this in other places. And
obviously, Craig is excluding the Katie Halper show from his exceptionalizing of Dropsite. But yes, please keep going.
It goes without saying, I'm an eternal friend of the show for the Katie Halper show.
I don't do original reporting. So.
I mean, independent media that that is providing an antidote to the corporate media that is, never saw a war, a genocide that they didn't love, has never been more important. So, but Murtaza Hussein has dropped this incredible story that revealed that this Israeli plant, and he's not just an Israeli, he came from the Israeli government. He's trained as an intel officer, as is revealed in these as well. He's made his way up through the UN chain, not through his own competence, but through inappropriate interference with various UN agencies. This guy, Yahav Lichtner, and he has been systematically leaking confidential UN documents and information to the Israeli regime. He's been running cover for the Israeli regime inside the UN. He's been acting as an agent of political corruption inside the organization. He's been working to obstruct the UN's human rights work to hold the Israelis accountable. He's targeted agencies like UNDP, the main development agency, UNFPA, the UN Fund for Population Assistance, the UN Secretariat and its various departments, especially the UN Human Rights Office, where I used to work, and its independent human rights mechanisms. It's targeted he was targeting private meetings between the UN High Commissioner for Human Rights and the US government during his visits to Washington, and targeting UN staff that he thought might be problematic to the Israeli regime because they were doing their job honestly. And even the Secretary General himself. And so what Murtaza Hussein and Dropsite did was they got this whole cache of very, to use the word again, revelatory emails. But by the way, from 2014 to 2015, they haven't yet revealed what's happened since then.
Right.
That came from this whistleblower website called Distributed Denial of Secrets, originally from Handala, that you mentioned, this hacker group. And these leaks revealed a lot. One of the things is they revealed the depth of collaboration between the Israeli regime and the U.S. government, both in Washington, at the UN in New York, including, by the way, Samantha Power in particular.
Yes, thank you. Right. Yes.
And how the U.S. has been so instrumental, first in planting Lichtner in the UN, and getting him promoted and placed in sensitive positions. And then I think even more disturbing is that it reveals the worrying degree of very improper collaboration from UN officials themselves, including several references to a well-placed woman staffer that they refer to as our friend.
Yeah.
My own suspicions on who that is from my own time there.
Who's that? Can you reveal it? Or
I can't reveal it publicly. It's a suspicion.
Right.
But I can tell you that I had many, through the years that I was at the UN, I had many battles with people who I accused of collecting two pensions, one from the UN and one from one or more governments on the outside because of their conduct inside the UN, which is a breach, by the way, of the rules of the UN. When you are an international civil servant, the worst violation that you can perpetrate is to be working for a government or supporting an individual government instead of your duties to a universal organization. And there were people who did so, some that I suspect very much. There are certain agencies that are more ripe for that within the UN. So, for example, you have the World Food Program and UNICEF that are dominated by the US. The US is the main donor. They automatically get to head the organization. Those heads are political appointees that come right out of the back pocket of US administrations, to head them. They function very differently from other UN agencies because of that. And then most dangerous of all, from my perspective, is the UN Department of Political Affairs, which is always headed by somebody from the national security establishment of the US, from the State Department, from the NSC, and always does a lot of damage control for the US and by extension for the Israelis. And I highly suspect that this well-placed woman staffer was probably in the Department of Political Affairs, but I have no evidence to prove that. That's where I would place them from my own experience. But as well as, other unidentified people within the UN that were providing, Lichtner, where he was sitting, he didn't have direct access to the documents he was sharing. Those were coming either from the Department of Political Affairs or from the Office of the Secretary General himself. So there were people collaborating with him inside the United Nations, providing confidential documents, communications, and information to this Lichtner guy, who was then providing them to the Israeli regime. Wow. And then you had senior officials that were accepting these requests from the United States and from the Israeli government to act on Lichtner's behalf to facilitate his appointments and his promotions in these increasingly senior posts, which is, again, a violation of the rules. And then one of the things that I found most interesting about this was that some of the names that are mentioned by Lichtner in his communications that he was watching in particular were names like Nikolai Mladinov. Some people will know the name Mladinov. This is from references from 2014, 2015. He's now the head of the governance body of Trump's Board of Peace. So wow. He was appointed as the special coordinator, was very much embraced by the Israelis in that role, was a constant source of irritation for the human rights side of the House because of his whitewashing of Israeli abuses while he was in that role. And then he accepted this role as one of the leading faces on the unlawful and horrific Colonial Board of Peace of Trump. So that tells you how long some of these people were cultivated. Or Catherine Colonna, who is mentioned here in these emails, who years later would be tapped by the UN to lead the UN's investigation into UNRWA after the US and the Israelis made false accusations against UNRWA in an attempt to shut it down during the genocide in order to facilitate the genocide. That's very interesting to see who he was interacting with. And then there is the scandal that came up year after year that's mentioned in here. The Secretary General's Special Advisor on Children in Armed Conflict issues this annual report of countries that are violating the human rights of children in armed conflict, and it creates a list that goes to the Security Council for accountability purposes. And every year, the Israeli regime would be on that list, and it would be removed in the Secretary General's office before the report went public. And here you see this Lichtner guy working behind the scenes to make sure that the Israeli regime is purged from that list as well.
Wow.
So, and it's mostly human rights. You see several references to attempts to either influence or water down or counter UN reports on Israeli atrocities. And remember, this guy served in 2 UN agencies and is currently the head of the UNICEF office in Washington, D.C., the main agency responsible for the rights of children. He's the head of their Washington, D.C. office after all of this. And I think people should watch very carefully. If he is not suspended and investigated within the next 48 hours, in the next few days, then you will know just how low the UN Secretary General has been prepared to bow to the Americans and to the Israelis. And then it'll be interesting to see what the Trump administration does after this. But I just say, Kitty, this is one of the worst kept secrets in the UN, which is the growing reach of the Israeli regime influence inside the UN through spying, through planting regime proxies inside the organization, through the creation of these Zionist harassment cells like UN Watch and UK Lawyers for Israel that attack UN officials and human rights monitors, but especially through the extraordinary mobilization of pressure from the US government on behalf of the Israeli regime pressuring UN officials, starting with the Secretary General on down, and telling them, you will do what Israel wants, or we will cut your budget and we will make you pay in other ways as well. And this has always been there, but it started to become institutionalized under Kofi Annan, who took power after Boutros Ghali was forced out by the Americans.
Boutros Ghali, to quote Ali G, who's sadly played by Sacha Baron Cohen, a Zionist. But anyway, sorry, keep going.
Boutros Ghali, the SG, so nice they named him twice.
Right.
And after he was forced out, Kofi Annan tried to make nicey-nicey with the U.S. in particular, and that means by extension with the Israelis. But then it really peaked under the tenure of Ban Ki-moon as Secretary General, who was exceptionally close to the U.S. government, very deferential to the U.S., especially with regard to Israel, and made a commitment and started appointing Israelis all over the organization. And again, I'm not just talking about Israelis who happen to be human rights experts or development experts who come from, the technical communities, people from the Israeli government, from the regime, who were there obviously to do the bidding of the regime. And that is continued under Guterres and his appointees, who to this day, 3 years into the genocide in Palestine, refuse to utter the word genocide when they're talking about Palestine in public, and even less so in U.S.-dominated agencies like UNICEF and the World Food Program and the Department of Political Affairs, that's always headed by U.S. government officials. Since 2018 or so, it's been headed by Rosemary DiCarlo, who came straight from the U.S. State Department and the NSC, and before her, Jeffrey Feltman, who came from the State Department, was a Bush appointee, served in the U.S. Embassy in Israel, very close to the Israelis, was a part of the occupation authority in Iraq, the U.S. occupation in Iraq, was Assistant Secretary of State for the Mideast, doing the Israeli bidding in U.S. foreign policy. And you have no firewall between the demands of individual powerful member states like the U.S. on the one hand, and the budgeting and appointment processes in the UN on the other, even though these are breaches of the rules. And so when the U.S. barks, you see these inappropriate reactions taking place as well. So this is a fantastic revelation by Mortaza Hussein and Dropsite News. It is the tip of an iceberg. It is a glimpse into a period 2014 to 2015 that has only gotten worse. I can tell you from my own experience. I've attended a lot of the meetings that are mentioned in these revelations. I've attended the Secretary General Senior Management Team meetings. I've accompanied the High Commissioner to his meetings in Washington. I've seen the way these things function, and I've seen the interference that comes. And I can tell you it's only gotten worse since here, and it's really important that this stuff be revealed so that it can be removed from corrupting the organization. And I'll just finish by saying, look what they're doing to the International Criminal Court. Similar efforts are made in the United Nations and in all international institutions that could represent some kind of constraints on the raw power of the U.S.-Israel axis in their current, campaign against international law and international human rights all around the globe.
Well, I actually want to just show some of I want to show this article and some of its revelations, because I think it's very telling, and it's interesting to watch it, to see it. Okay, so here it is. For your eyes only, Israel's mole inside the United Nations. Hacked emails show Yahav Lichner, a UN official, repeatedly supplied Israeli diplomats with confidential UN reports and private briefings. He now directs UNICEF's Washington office. And here are some of the translated leaked emails. So here's one. Unfortunately, it doesn't let me zoom in that much more. Okay, it's funny. I have to zoom out to zoom in. Okay, but it says, for your eyes only, not for distribution, attached is a classified internal summary of Zed's meetings in Washington. See who he met with there beyond Rice and Mahmoud. He also met with members of Congress, including our friend Graham, RIP, and Jewish organizations. One of his insights from the visit is that his funding from the Americans, Congress, is in danger because of the Gaza Commission of Inquiry, and therefore he is trying to do damage control and distance himself from the report. Below are excerpts from his summary. So what do we know about the Gaza Commission of Inquiry?
Yeah, I mean, there were, every time a commission of inquiry was mandated by the UN Human Rights Council, these are independent human rights investigations that documented the atrocities of the Israeli regime through its successive massacres in Gaza, another one in the attack on the Mavi Marmara, where the Israeli forces murdered the humanitarians aboard one of the first flotilla ships and so on. There would be a huge pushback from the United States government, from the Israeli regime, from its Israel proxy groups and so on. And they would, the way the U.S. would do this is they would directly threaten the funding of the organization and the individuals at its head. So they would threaten high commissioners, secretaries general, whatever, with all kinds of sticks that they have at their disposal. And so you would often see the case of senior officials trying to distance themselves from UN, just as Antonio Guterres is doing now, with the findings of the UN Commission of Inquiry on the genocide, with the special rapporteur, who they have done nothing to defend. From U.S. sanctions and other sorts of things. They think they can wash their hands of it, these political appointees, and somehow make nicey-nicey with the Americans and the Israelis by lowering their voice on Israeli atrocities. That happened then. I've accompanied Zaid Rad Al Hussein, the High Commissioner, to other visits to Washington where I saw the pressure that was being deployed. I'm in there. I saw successive secretaries general tried to downplay, initiatives. For example, there is an annual database that monitors companies that are unlawfully doing business in the occupied territories, supporting the unlawful occupation of Palestine. There's a database of these businesses that's been mandated by the member states themselves in the Human Rights Council. And at the behest of the Americans and the Israelis, that database, which is supposed to be published by the High Commissioner of Human Rights in the office that I used to work for, they delayed that for years intentionally and reassured Zionist organizations that they were delaying it.
Wow.
Successive secretaries general, including Ban Ki-moon and Antonio Guterres and others. So you see those kinds of things happening. So the internal pressure, the pressure, especially from the Americans, but the pressure also from these Israel regime proxy groups that attack the UN and so on. And then they go to Congress. And the Human Rights Office is not represented in those congressional hearings. They bring in these Zionist attack cells like UN Watch and others, who simply spout their lies and their attacks and their smears on behalf of the Israeli regime. And that's the congressional record, and that gets fed into to budget decisions on U.S. funding and for various programs and organizations and so on. So the threats are real, but you have a choice to make as a UN official. Choice number one is that you choose the norms, the standards, international law, the human rights rules, your oath as an international civil servant, and the mandate of your organization to defend human rights without fear or favor. That's choice number one. Or you give in to political pressure and you say, okay, we will criticize human rights abuses in countries X, Y, and Z, but we won't criticize those that the American government doesn't want us to criticize. The minute you have done that, there is no reason for the UN to exist, because then it's just a conference hall for the most powerful states to dictate to the less powerful states. And that's the law of the jungle that exists outside the UN. The UN was supposed to set up a system of international law, international diplomacy, where you could mitigate the law of the jungle. If the UN itself is an extension of US empire, an extension of the law of the jungle, there's no reason for it to exist. So as a UN official, especially if you are the Secretary General, the High Commissioner for Human Rights, or whatever the case may be, your duty is to just, without fear or favor, in every circumstance, defend the norms and standards of the organization. If that means they fire you, or they smear you, or they slander you, so be it. You're going to be okay. You were appointed to this job not because you came from working in a garage somewhere. You are a privileged person. You're going to be just fine. Right. But your legacy will not be fine if you do these kinds of things. And they know that it works. That's why they do it. And they do it through planting their own people on the inside. One of the revelations in this report was, just mentioned in one of the documents was how somebody was going to be appointed to a position and they mobilized against it. And so working from the inside, but also working from the outside by bringing in these threats, personal threats, threats to your budget, threats to whatever the case may be. Unfortunately, not all of the people appointed to senior positions had the courage and principle necessary to do the jobs to which they were appointed, and that's not a mistake. There is now a campaign for a new Secretary General. You can be damn sure that the candidate with the best chance of succeeding will be the one that the Americans, the Israelis, the Brits, the French, the P5, and others are least afraid of, the one who is most likely to do their bidding and to triangulate power, as Antonio Guterres has done, and not to do anything to offend them. And I always repeat this quote from the Americans whenever election time comes up. They say they want a Secretary General who's more secretary and less general. And that's what we're going to get, almost certainly.
Right. Craig, we have a couple more minutes with you, right? You've been very generous with your time.
Sure.
What do we wanted to ask you to just talk about why you spoke at the Green Party Congress, what the Green Party means to you, what electoral politics means to you, why you think the Green Party is so important.
I think anyone watching the show knows what a horror show the last presidential elections were in the United States, where we were forced to choose between two parties, both of which were enthusiastically participating in a genocide, enthusiastically participating in serial aggression around the world, Democrat and Republican, enthusiastically embracing the oligarchs, the billionaires, the lobbies that control domestic and foreign policy in this country, both of which support neoliberal economics, both of which support corporatism at home, both of which support a for-profit healthcare system, both of which support militarism abroad, both of which support American exceptionalism abroad, both of which support neoconservative foreign policy. So on the things that matter most to the lives and livelihoods of people abroad and at home, they are barely distinguishable. One of them is more vulgar than the other. One of them, knows how to read, and the other side doesn't seem to. But both of them, in the end, are executing the same horrific policies of a billionaire class that is acting in its own interest and not in the interest of the American people, and certainly not in the interest of innocent people all around the world. And we're told every 4 years, in fact, we're told every 2 years with other races, that we have to vote for the lesser evil, knowing by function of logic that the lesser evil is evil, and often it's not lesser. There was no more enthusiastic supporter of genocide in Palestine than Joe Biden. And Donald Trump is, in my view, I know there's debate on this, I think Donald Trump is a fascist, not because he's read fascist dogma or done research on the subject. Right. He is an instinctive fascist who has found a movement that is extremely fascistic that supports his power. And so I think he is a genuine fascist threat. And Marco Rubio, with all of his building this, what I've called a fascist international by convening right-wing governments and white governments from around the world to try to attack the left, to try to attack the people of Western Asia, the people of Latin America, and so on. I think, you've got to be really blind not to see today that this fascist curtain is dropping all around us. So we know that the threat from the Republicans is real. But we know that it was the Democrats who helped to build this threat. And we know without exception in our political history that whenever a move toward the reduction of human rights happened, whether it was, the neoliberal response to deindustrialization that caused so much deprivation in this country, the dismantling of the New Deal that caused so much deprivation in this country, the war on drugs with all of its disproportionate jailing of Black and brown bodies that caused so much suffering in these countries, the war on terrorism that legalized summary executions, kidnapping, torture, information mining of human beings in Guantanamo, the mass murder of people abroad, the erosion of our rights, the bailout of the banks. Every time one of those things was done, if it was done by first a Republican, it was consolidated and expanded by a Democrat. There are two major parties in this country that do not represent the interest or the values of decent people in this country, which tells us either we reinforce one of those parties or we look to independence and third-party options. For me, the Green Party represents my values, and so I was happy to speak at their convention in Chicago, where you actually have people who are standing up for the things that we believe in: human rights and equality and peace and environmental sanity, and diplomacy, and the belief that healthcare and housing and water and sanitation and food are not commodities for sale to those who can afford them. They are fundamental human rights to which we are all entitled. And that security is not state security. It's human security. It's the security of the person, including against a government that would drag you away in the middle of the night, throw you in an orange jumpsuit and deport you somewhere. So the Green Party, very much aligned with those values. I think some independents are aligned with those values. And so I was very happy to join others who were there speaking, like Medea Benjamin and Ali Abunimah and Jill Stein and Roger Waters and Brianna Joy Gray. It was quite an assembly, and candidates and organizers from all around the country from the Green Party who came together, including people running for public office. I think you're going to have a guest on very soon who is willing to throw his hat in the ring for that purpose. And you will notice across the board, it is these principled voices, those who have stood up to power and who now want to try to get inside the machine to make a difference and to give us options to vote for someone who doesn't offend our most basic values. And I think most Americans are disgusted in one way or another with the two main corrupted, bought and paid for political parties that represent the billionaires and those that can buy them and that act against our interest every day. And the Green Party is one venue for that.
Well, Craig, Brad, I was going to show that you have if you ever run for the Green Party or something else, Brad has just come up with a great slogan for you, which is Mokhiber, less problems, Craig 2028. So this is your second presidential endorsement. And just really quickly, last thing, very quickly before we let you go, what are your thoughts on people like Daria Lizia Chevalier, Abdul El Sayed, Zohran Mamdani, people who are trying to effectuate change from within the Democratic Party?
Look, I'm all for it. I know that there's a debate on whether or not that just draws people away from the real kind of resistance that we need. But I do believe that those who can make inroads into institutions where they might potentially have some impact and draw it away from those who we know. I mean, in every one of those cases, you had basically, look at Mamdani. Mamdani ran against the Israel lobby, Wall Street, the real estate lobby in New York, which is extremely powerful, all of the media corporations without exception, the Republican Party, the Democratic Party, all of the most powerful institutions in the country were united to stop him because they didn't want somebody who was outspoken against Israeli atrocities, many of them because he is a Muslim as well, and they harbor those deeply racist ideas about certain groups in the United States, because he had a populist progressive agenda that was going to focus on affordability in a city that 10 years from now won't be the same. It won't be New York anymore. It'll be a city just for rich people, and then it's not going to be interesting. Who the hell wants to be in a city just full of rich people without the richness and the diversity and the culture that has made New York such a great city? You can tell I miss New York.
I know.
And Mamdani, dared to challenge that. So whatever vehicle you can find, wherever you are, inside politics or outside politics, if you could challenge it, that's a good thing for progress. I don't resent that at all. Just don't be fooled into thinking that, and we have to keep the pressure on these people because we've been fooled before with very strong progressive.
Will Lawrence today just said, who won his congressional primary in Michigan, he let his, I didn't realize this, he had let his DSA membership lapse this month, so he wouldn't technically be DSA member. And he already said today he would vote for Hakeem Jeffries as Speaker of the House.
Yeah, this kind of thing. We heard that from AOC as well, who has broken our hearts, many times in the past. Fool me once, shame on you. Fool me 600 times, and that's a lot of shame on me. So we've seen this before, where progressive voices get into the Democratic Party, and then they taste a little bit of power, and then they're not on our side anymore. Right. So if you can get in there and drive and create some principled change, more power to you. Go for it. But I think we also have to put a lot of energy into building alternatives that are not bought and paid for by the billionaire class, the oligarchs, the tech bros, and things like the Green Party are one opportunity to do that. We're not there yet, but these things have to be built over time, and that requires an investment. And so yeah, fight the fight wherever you can fight the fight. If you turn around then and start, voting for aid for the Israeli regime, or voting against, public health care, or whatever the case may be, then it's our job to punish you.
Right.
And I hope that we will.
Yes. Well, thank you, Craig, so much. Let me just see if there any of the super chats relate to you. Well, I'm sure that you helped inspire the new members, so thank you for that. HT Flow. We already showed Craig Mokhiber for president. We got another member. Thank you, E Rogers. Thank you, HT Flow. I showed that. Thanks, Katie. Awesome journalism, always courageous. Thank you, Turk. I agree. We have to try on all fronts. Who knows what will work? That's from Bob Bier. So thank you so much for those super chats. And Craig, thank you as always for coming on. Love talking to you. And you are our human rights law stringer for the Katie Halper Show. So, you may have felt compelled to resign from the UN, but you got such an upgrade.
My conscience is very comfortable working with you, Katie, so I won't be resigning from you anytime soon. Great to be with you all the time. Thanks to Brad as well.
Thank you so much. Have a great night.
Okay, you too. Bye-bye.
Bye, Craig. That was great. I love talking to Craig, and he's so eloquent. It's a little embarrassing because I'm like fumbling with a word, and then I hear him say it. Like he, finishes my sentence, not in an obnoxious way, but very unassuming way. If I ever ran for office and need to give speeches or something, I would try to have him as my, in my ear person. I think we're just going to keep the show going because we have someone who's making an exclusive announcement. I think this is his first time announcing something that he's doing. It's very exciting. I'm not even going to say a lot more. I'm just going to let him come on the show, but I will give you some background into who he is. His name is Sam Husseini. He's an independent journalist, currently writing at husseini.substack.com. He's written for a variety of publications, including Counterpunch, The Nation, The Washington Post, USA Today, and Salon. And he's written extensively about Palestinians and international law. He wrote last year. Well, he has repeatedly written about the possibility of a country invoking the Genocide Convention against Israel at the International Court of Justice. And he regularly attends State Department briefings, asking tough questions. And in fact, we are going to take a look at some of these interesting, tough question asking sessions. But without further ado, welcome back to the show, Sam Husseini.
Great to be with you, Katie. Thank you for inviting me.
Of course. So I have tons of questions to ask you about whether you want to respond to anything Khanna has said or Craig Mokhiber has said, also about your recent interactions with the powers that be, like Chuck Schumer. But first, I want to give you the chance to make this very important announcement.
Absolutely. I am announcing here that I am running for Congress. I think that it's imperative that we get past the duopoly in a very serious way. The district where I live is Maryland's 4th district, right outside of Washington, D.C. It is currently represented by Glenn AIPAC Ivey. He basically got into office in 2020 on a flood of AIPAC money, knocking out Donna Edwards, who was a fairly progressive, Democrat, or, somebody you could work with. And she actually went to Gaza back in 2009. I think that's part of the reason they especially targeted her. And one thing that's interesting about the district is that Glenn Ivey 2 years ago won with 88%. Just totally crushed the Republican, and there wasn't a Green. The Greens here did a ton of legwork, got on the ballot, knocked on my door, said, let's make use of this ballot line that we got here, and let's really, push the issues. And so there's none of this spoiler stuff applies. I objectively have a better chance at winning this election than the Republican does. Right. It's an overwhelmingly Democratic Party district historically. And we just simply have to go at the duopoly in a serious way. And I think doing it in this district is actually especially poignant, because it's outside of DC. and it'll have, potentially national ramifications that way. Glenn Ivey went off and visited with Steny Hoyer and other Congress people, Netanyahu, at least twice in the last 2 years. The levels of issues that stem out of the U.S.-Israeli relationship, I think it's not only a matter of so much money going to Israel so that they can, bomb schools and hospitals and housing in Gaza, money that should be spent here in Maryland and across the country. But I think it has an incredibly corrosive effect to our very democracy, right? It has to do with policing. It has to do with big tech surveillance. It has to do with the First Amendment. The U.S.-Israeli relationship, in all of its corruptions, really makes the U.S. more of an empire and even less of a democracy. And I think that has to be taken on very squarely, and all kinds of connections need to be made. I mean, and Craig spoke to some of this with ICE, and other agencies work with big tech firms like Palantir and have been trained by Israeli forces and so on. So I think that there's so many aspects of this that need to be taken on.
Yeah. Well, let's see, Brad, you just, can you throw up this image of, put the image again of of Ivey? So Glenn Ivey, U.S. representative. So let's see, how much have they spent on him?
Yeah, over $7 million.
Yes, over $7 million. Donations, 858,000, and independent expenditures over $6 million. Okay, there you go. And look at this. So let's see. Yeah, so this is just some of the info about him that you've put up there. Anything else you want to make sure we know about him?
No, well, I mean, he even was opposed to Obama's Iran deal. I mean,
one of those, yeah.
he has been such a complete tool for AIPAC in so many ways. Now, like a lot of Democrats, they're, especially with Trump in the presidency, they're trying to reshuffle. So he actually did some halfway decent votes, or pretended to recently. But I bet you dollars to donuts that he was on the line with AIPAC saying, you don't need my vote on this NDAA thing, right?
Right.
Okay, I can vote, I can vote against it and pretend to be a good guy for my constituents who've been battling down my door for a couple of years, and I can pretend to be a good guy here.
Right.
So you have these performative votes, I think, increasingly among Democrats who have, a very long history of being, totally pro-imperial Israel.
Right. Yeah. You had some interesting comments about Abdul El Sayed's recent victory. So you tweeted that the recent win from Abdul El Sayed and the defeat of the Zionist incumbent is, quote, good to see, end quote. You said good to see. You also said, quote, we need to defeat structures more than people. So can you elaborate on that?
Yeah, I feel like people get into this trap of saying, oh, I hate so-and-so, so I gotta back so-and-so. And it just becomes a visceral thing. I mean, we see this in spades with Trump, right? There's so much hatred against Trump, lots of it for lots of good reasons, but then the Democrats get to hide behind that. And I'm concerned that there's some of that in a lot of different races, including in this one, because Haley Stevens was, I mean, she was just so insanely over the top.
Israel comes to her in her dreams.
Yeah, exactly. That I think it prevents us from, scrutinizing things so that we don't continue down this road of this, Obama ends up, killing lots of people with drones and doing lots of terrible things. And then AOC, and, I got criticisms of Mandani as well. And here we go. So, I mean, the prospect, I mean, I agree, fight on all fronts
Right, like
and
Craig said.
in all institutions. But, if you're trying to fight genocide inside a genocidal party, the chances are you're going to end up being an appendage of that system, right? I mean, if El Sayed wins the seat, he's in effect helping ensure that Chuck Schumer becomes majority leader.
Can you elaborate on that? How is he doing that? You mean just by like simply numerically speaking?
Numerically speaking,
Yeah.
I mean, not that the Republican alternative is any better to speak of, but if that's the net result, and all that El Sayed ends up doing is, some speeches and so on, and doesn't affect policy. Another point that I made that I think that we need to keep an eye out, he's been so outspoken in his opposition to the filibuster. Now, that's one of the few really interesting things that he could do if he got in and used the filibuster against the AIPAC majority in the Senate. I think that could be really effective, but he seems to be positioning himself to completely disarm against the prospect of using the filibuster. So I'd be very cautious about that as well.
Right. Yeah. Well, speaking of, I mean, I struggle with, I do think that maybe there's a way that you can remain critical. You can acknowledge that there are people who have, there are people whose being empowered does have a concrete impact on people's lives. I think it was Greg Stoker who said something like that. Like, it will make there are meaningful differences that are brought about by people, even if it's not on a structural level. And so, a rent freeze, for instance, by Zohran Mamdani has real implications. I think the question is really, is whether or not, like, you can vote for these people without putting all your faith into electoral politics in general, which I do think is something that we have to see electoral politics for what it is, and obviously it has limitations. And this is true whichever party you're with, right? Like, I'm not downplaying the duopoly's corrosive nature, but I do think we have to always remember that electoralism interacts and is shaped by forces outside of it. But I wanted to ask you about, since I brought up, did you want to say something?
Yeah, I mean, I think we have to scrutinize, and we have to be, I think, like, hyper strategic. I mean, that's part of the reason that I'm doing this run here, right? There is no compelling case in my humble view, not to do this, not to really go after a Democrat who's been so corrupt, like Glenn Ivey.
Right.
He's basically like what's sometimes called a new Democrat, even though he's black, he's African American, but he's still of that tenor of Democrat, and so we I think have to look at things not just strategically, but hyper strategically. And given that there's no compelling argument in terms of, like, oh, I'm afraid of the Republican and so on, that it becomes an opening to actually use that in order to make as compelling a case as possible.
Right. But yes, I agree. And Sam, I'm going to blame Ralph Nader for calling you that, and it's definitely put in my head. That's just how I think of you. He does have such an authoritative voice, so you can hardly blame me. But speaking of Chuck Schumer, let's play an interaction that you had with Chuck Schumer the other day. And this was at an anti-corruption conference he partook in, put on by Public Citizen. So can you tell us, set up what people need to know, especially people who don't know what Public Citizen is? Tell us where this was, when this was, why this was happening, and then what inspired you.
Well, speaking of Ralph Nader, Public Citizen was founded by Ralph Nader, largely as an anti-corruption thing, does work on medical issues, public safety, and so on and so forth. But like a lot of nonprofits, they have become more and more oriented towards the Democratic Party and less independent. And they sort of hit a new low here, in my view, that they had this anti-corruption event, and they invited Chuck Schumer to speak at it. And I also learned that they were not planning on allowing any questions to him. So after he spoke for just a little bit, I stood up and I said what I felt needed to be said and questioned him.
What is Ralph Nader's relationship to Public Citizen now?
I don't think that there is one. I vaguely recall that they might have taken him off the masthead as a founder when he ran for president, because that was drying up their funding. Because a lot of their, funders are moneyed liberals who weren't fond of him running for president. But I don't know if that's changed or not. But that's my most recent knowledge about that.
Got it. Yeah. So let's take a look at this intervention of yours.
So glad that you're all here today with us to really dig in on these themes, to feature a set of experts and senators as they share their take on corruption and what we need to do to combat it. I am thrilled to hand the mic to our first speaker, Senate Minority Leader Chuck Schumer.
Now, in 2016, Trump sold his false promise to the American people that he would drain the swamp. The presidency is supposed to be a public trust. Trump has turned it into the single most profitable.
Senator, you talk about corruption. How can you talk about corruption when you back genocide? What could be more corrupt than backing genocide? This is part of the same con with you and Trump playing off of each other. Oh, he's worse. Oh, he's worse. You were put on notice in November of 2023 by the Center for Constitutional Rights and other legal and human rights organizations. Notice on potential legal liability for aiding, abetting, inciting, or conspiring to commit genocide through congressional acts and demands. You were put on notice, and you backed it, and you backed the genocide to the hilt for years on end. How dare you talk about corruption? How dare you talk about corruption?
Thank you for your diatribe.
Oh,
now,
you get to make a speech every day. You get to make a hypocritical speech every day, and God forbid you should be questioned about your diabolical record. It's amazing that you can show your genocidal face in public, Mr. Senator. Mr. Senator. Shame on Public Citizen for not allowing questions to this genocidal maniac. Shame, yeah. Corruption. What could be more corrupt than not allowing questions?
Sorry about that. Let's continue with the subject at hand. Okay. The presidency is supposed to be a public trust. Trump has turned it into the single most profitable scam of his entire life.
I love the end of that, because it just goes, Trump is bad.
Right.
I lay out this elaborate critique, and he just goes back to Trump is bad, because that's all he's got.
Of course. Yeah.
Trump is bad. That's it.
What is that big thing you're holding, by the way, Sam?
That's my notebook / sketchbook. I do a lot of art.
Oh yeah, right. That's right. I forgot to point that out. Yeah.
So
that's really cool.
So I'm doing a combination of scribbling stuff, and it's funny. I actually sat next to him. Like I sat in the front row, and then when they brought him in through, there was a side bar to that room. It's literally a bar. And then he sat next to me, so I had to make sure he couldn't read my scribblings.
Oh yeah, right. So you couldn't give a preview away. Yeah. That was interesting. I mean, that is I have to say, that's a pretty tame response compared to other responses we've seen to your questioning. Were you prepared for worse?
Well, no, you're probably referring most notably during Blinken's last news conference. Blinken didn't show his face for over a year in the briefing room, and then he finally came out just a few days before the Biden administration was ending. So I got up and asked him. I didn't get up. I stayed seated and tried to ask him a bunch of questions. Along with Max Blumenthal, and Max was escorted out. Max really just did some comments, but I tried to, just really hammer away at questions. And they were all questions that I had asked Matthew Miller, the spokesman, about, and he had lied about them. So I was basically hammering and doubling down about the lie. I mean, the most brazen one perhaps was Miller even said that he didn't know what the Hannibal Directive was. I think I was the only person in the State Department press corps to say, aren't you endangering U.S. law? I mean, there are U.S. citizens that were, being held, and Israel was still potentially applying the Hannibal Directive, and their prime raison d'etre is supposed to be protecting U.S. lives.
Right.
So I think that they, as a matter of policy, had to pretend that they didn't know about the Hannibal.
Right.
Well, I spat that out as well as other stuff when I confronted Blinken, and I was insistent, didn't want to leave, and held on to the table, and they literally carried me out, and then they shoved me around in the hallway, and I ended up with a concussion. I still have some symptoms, but for like 8 months after that, I was getting headaches every day.
Wow, I didn't know that.
Yeah,
I mean, I knew
yeah.
that. So let's actually take a look at that, and then we'll return to the Hannibal Directive, because I mean, we've talked about it a lot, but I just want to make sure that everyone who's watching this knows what it is, because it's so telling. Kind of like we were saying before with Craig Mokhiber, it's so revelatory in nature. So let's take a look at this intervention with Blinken.
Board answering questions in 1 minute. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Look forward to answering questions. Thank you.
Sir,
would you like to be escorted out?
Go away.
You don't have the responsibility to tell me where to go. You want to be escorted out or not?
Thank you. I look forward to answering questions in a minute.
I'm not a potted plant.
Everyone will have an opportunity to ask questions in just a minute. Thank you.
That's a lie. He full well knows that he's not going to give everybody an opportunity to ask questions.
So, I have no greater pleasure in this job than crossing off a list I carry in my pocket the names of those who have been arbitrarily detained and unfairly held hostage.
I tell them they don't want to end up on the wrong side of this.
Bringing them home, returning them to their families, returning them to their loved ones. Finally,
Get your hands off me.
Morning,
Get your hands off me. Get your hands off me. Get your hands off me. Answer a damn question. Do you know about the Hannibal Directive? Do you know about Israel's nuclear weapons? Everybody from the ICJ. I was sitting here quietly, and now I'm being manhandled by 2 or 3 people. You pontificate about a free press. You pontificate about a free press. You are hurting me. You are hurting me. You are hurting me. I'm asking questions after being told by Matt Miller that he will not answer my questions until I'm asking questions. Wasn't the point of the May 31st statement to block the ICJ orders? You blocked the ICJ orders.
please, sir, respect the process.
Respect the process. Respect the process. While everybody from Amnesty International. From Amnesty International to the ICJ saying that Israel's doing genocide and extermination, and you're telling me to respect the process. Criminal! Why aren't you in The Hague?
That was like, I mean, that respect the process thing is just still, it gets me every time. Like, I mean, it is so, talk about the weaponization of process and civility, right? Like literally to shield someone who is enabling a genocide. And if you're a stickler for process, obviously violating the hell out of international law and international humanitarian law, but obviously he doesn't care about that. But like, how dare he try to hide behind process?
Right, and dragging journalists out.
Oh yeah, of course. Right. Yeah, exactly. What about the process there? Yeah. So tell us about that and what you brought up there. You brought up the Hannibal Directive. What else did you bring up? You brought up
the ICJ orders. Yes,
right.
You know, what I was particularly raising there, and this is just phenomenal, and I think still very poorly understood. You know, when South Africa, got orders from the ICJ in early 2024, and by the way, I was pushing for a country to invoke the Genocide Convention in 2023. That was sort of like my focus then, and thank God South Africa did it. And then they went to the ICJ, and they issued a series of orders. The first 2 were good, but not specific enough. The last one in May was very specific and very direct. It said, you, Israel, began your invasion of Rafah on May 7th. You must immediately stop your invasion of Rafah. This came down on May 24th. And what I expected to happen was that Algeria was supposed to put forward a resolution to implement that order from the court. And then we expected the U.S. to veto it. And then that would really propel one of the things that Craig talked about, uniting for peace, a process whereby the General Assembly can basically step in and say, you, Security Council, have failed in your responsibility to maintain international peace and security. And so we're going to step in and start doing serious stuff like imposing sanctions on Israel. And this is exactly the mechanism that was used against South Africa in the 1980s. Right. So that's what I expected to happen. But what they did was so slick and insidious. People might remember this. Biden got up in late May of 2024 and said, yay, Netanyahu has agreed to a ceasefire, and we will ensure the implementation of this ceasefire, and we'll have a negotiated process between Israel and Hamas. Everybody was so desperate to hear the word ceasefire come out of Biden's mouth that they weren't scrutinizing the con that he was perpetrating. And because I was so, focused on the ICJ case, this was obviously their way of sabotaging the ICJ orders. So they wrote up their phony baloney resolution, blessing their negotiating process. They got the Algerians to tear up the resolution they were apparently working on, allegedly. I mean, I don't know. Maybe the Algerian government was in on it the whole time. That they got the Security Council and to pass it, and all 14 members of the Security Council voted for this complete farce of a resolution. It made no mention of the ICJ orders. The Russians called it out. They actually said this is baloney in their statement, but they didn't veto it. They just abstained. Right. So the thing passed, and a bunch of countries talked about the ICJ orders in their remarks, but it wasn't in the resolution. So it was a resolution to sabotage international law. It was completely demented, and they basically got away with it. And then that allowed the genocide to continue at full speed throughout the rest of the Biden administration. And it also planted the seeds for Trump's phony board of peace, which is actually a board of genociders and profiteers. And you had a sort of a repeat there with the Chinese and the Russians abstaining and not vetoing, even though it's obviously a complete farce.
Yeah.
These systems become so corrupt that when they, when people power tries to assert itself, they try to find these, deceitful ways, and that negotiating process, that the U.S. was supposed to oversee. People might recall, how did that end? It ended with Israel literally killing the negotiators in Qatar.
Oh, right. Yeah.
That's how the negotiating process that the U.S. was going to assure, that's how that ended.
Right. As is their want. Right.
Yeah. So I think that it highlights that peace movements, in spite of so much goodwill from so many people, have to be as sly as foxes and as nimble as they can be. I mean, imagine if there were protests right at the UN at that particular time, if all the students from Colombia got down to the UN and forced the Algerians to, or compelled the Algerians to put forward their resolution, forced a US veto, compelled Uniting for Peace to happen.
Right.
So those are, so that's asking about, how they sabotaged the ICJ orders. And, and it shows how willful it all was. I mean, a lot of these Biden administration officials and all these other Democrats are pretending to be, we kind of regret it. No, they went to incredible lengths to ensure the genocide continues at full throttle.
Right. And before we actually, believe it or not, we have even more videos of you interrupting, speaking truth to power. But before we move on to another one, can you talk about the Israel's nuclear weapons and also the Hannibal Directive, both of which you brought up in that exchange as well?
Right. Israel's nuclear weapons, Israel has had nuclear weapons for decades. I didn't find out, and for years I have been questioning U.S. politicians because it's U.S. government policy, and I've known this for years, to not acknowledge that Israel has nuclear weapons, and that always struck me as completely insane. And lots of people think that it's completely insane, but I really wanted to dig into it and really confront them as much as possible. I actually asked Schumer at the press club several years ago about this, and basically got him to tacitly, reluctantly acknowledge, because I kind of mocked him for not acknowledging it. Um, um, and I've written more extensively about this in recent years. I hadn't known this, that JFK, when he was in office, actually tried to stop Israel's nuclear weapons. I mean, he was sending letters to Ben Gurion, basically saying, this will cause serious issues in our relationship if you do not immediately allow inspectors
Ken McCarthy
to go
and
in.
Wally. Yeah, and Ken McCarthy and Wally Rashid, I've had them on together to talk about this, because they even did a comedic sketch. Israeli TV did a comedic sketch where they're having an interaction between JFK and Ben Gurion. That's like how they make light of it. But sorry, keep going.
I don't know if I'm up for making light of it. But,
no, yeah.
But I mean, this came to my attention right around the 60th anniversary of the assassination, and I wrote some really in-depth pieces about this. That really gets into some wild stuff. Like JFK the movie makes no mention of the whole Israel aspect of things, and the executive producer of JFK the movie ended up being a spy for Israel. Oh
my God.
Now, Oliver Stone has, mentioned some of this in the years since, but it's still wild that that's one thing that is nowhere to be found in the most prominent critique of the JFK assassination. Finally, so throughout 1963, JFK was sending these letters, and then when he sent the most strident one to Ben Gurion, the next day Ben Gurion resigned, effectively further stalling things. And then his successor came in, and his successor is like, Mr. President, I need time to figure out what's going on here. And they further delayed that. And then JFK was assassinated in November, and LBJ was just total rubber stamp for Israel, 1000%. On a lot of issues, but particularly this, as well as Robert Kennedy. By the way, you talked about AIPAC registering as a foreign agent. RFK, JFK's attorney general, was trying to get AIPAC to have to register as a foreign agent.
Wow.
So that's another thing that got flushed down the toilet.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, I'm giving too much of a history.
Oh, no. Yeah. So, well, what's surprising, though, is that people now are, I think for strategic reasons, you actually have people admitting it. You had Norman Finkelstein. Well, obviously, he doesn't admit it because he's a critic of Israel, but Norman Finkelstein brought it up on Piers Morgan, and Jonathan Conricus, who's this IDF high up. I can't remember what his position was. I mean, he has tons of blood on his head. He lied.
What happened? I didn't see this.
He said, he didn't deny it. He basically was like, and then Brett Stevens the other day, we talked about this with Husseini Saeed. He brought it up too. He was like, it's not a genocide. Israel's a nuclear power if they wanted to, which again reveals he doesn't know the definition of genocide, or he's lying through his teeth about it, because it doesn't require killing every single person. And it's very clear, like the criteria are very clear. But yeah, and the other day, I think Trump said something about Netanyahu, like, you shouldn't bring it up, like you're making it too obvious or something.
Yeah, I mean, there has been some shift. I mean, over the years, political leaders have generally been completely evasive about it. Right. And I asked the Trump administration last year, at the State Department, and they completely dodged it, refused to answer. But there has been, and by the way, I asked Ro Khanna about a year ago at an event here in DC, and he pretended that Israel didn't. Of course, Israel acknowledges it has nuclear weapons. And we were like, no, it doesn't.
That's so funny. Yeah. Wow. Yeah.
But there has been something of a shift recently, but I'm concerned that it's just another level of deceit. For example, there are U.S. laws that say the Glenn Symington amendments to the Arms Exports Control Act, that it would mean a cutoff of funding to a country if it was found to be a nuclear proliferator. And this was actually applied, at least for a time, to Pakistan by the Carter administration. And they, one part of the concern is that it would be applied to Israel. There was recently, and I've, called congressional offices trying to get them to acknowledge it. They wouldn't do it. And what they did do was finally write a letter a couple of months ago. Ro Khanna might have signed this, but I know AOC and Rashida Tlaib and others signed it. And the letter basically said, we urge the State Department to acknowledge that Israel has nuclear weapons, and we are prepared to work with the State Department to ensure that this doesn't automatically mean a cutoff of funding.
Right,
so they're trying to defang the law while bringing it more into a reality-based realm. So I don't know if that's just simply a mutation of evil rather than actual progress at this point.
Right. Wow. Well,
and one more thing,
yeah.
you have a variation of this from Marjorie Taylor Greene. She was, to my knowledge, virtually the first member of Congress to, on their own, say Israel's got nukes. But she did it in such a weird way. She said, why are we spending all this time and effort and money backing Israel and defending Israel? They got nukes. They can take care of themselves.
Wow.
The subtext of that is that maybe they should use them. Now,
Yeah.
I'm for acknowledging that Israel has nukes, but I'm not for making it
Right.
more palatable.
Yeah, I don't think so. I mean, I'm not a big what is it, Marjorie Taylor MTG fan, but I don't think I think she's just saying they're strong. I mean, it depends when.
Yeah.
But I mean, she's been critical of Israel for a while now, right? I can't imagine that she meant it in a go use them way.
Yeah.
Not because I
I'm not
trust her
sure.
morally. I mean, I just think her shtick is that she's an Israel critic who cares about children and stuff. But and then you also talked about, by the way, I found this is going to be really meta, but I want to play a little bit of me playing so this is totally meta. I mentioned that Wally Rashid and Ken McCarthy came on the show and that we talked about the JFK stuff, but that's also the show that that I played Norman Finkelstein on Piers Morgan. So right now, Sammy, you and I are going to watch me and Wally Rashid and Ken McCarthy watch Norman Finkelstein and talk to Piers Morgan.
I think I need a drink.
I know. Go get one. Yeah, I need one too. In fact, I'm gonna ask someone to bring me a drink. Actually, that's a good reminder while we're playing this. Okay, so this is gonna look really cool because we're all gonna be. You can of course feel free to leave the screen. To leave for a drink, but I do want to get you at least for a little bit. We have to get us all in the frame. Brad, do you want me to screen share or do you want to play it yourself? Come on down. I know you're a big fan of Sam, and his art.
Yeah.
So here you go.
Oh, of course.
Hey, Brad.
I'll send this to you now, so you can do this.
I have it, Katie.
Oh, you have it. The one of me talking to IDF. Okay, great.
Yes.
So let's take a look at this one. This is going to be very meta, as I said.
And then you can just, I guess, stop it whenever you
Great.
deem fit. Okay.
Itself. Basic. Okay.
Get to the question.
By all means.
Piers. Number one, there has always been an option.
By the way, pause because I can't
significantly
control this,
diminish
right? I
the
can't
threat.
control it. This is wait. Oh, Conricus was served in the IDF. He's Swedish. He served in the IDF and he was an IDF spokesman and he lied about many hospital bombings. So that's where. Okay, great. Let's go back to it.
To Israel, there has always been an option. It's to create a weapons of mass destruction free zone in the Middle East. We have one in Latin America, a weapons of mass destruction free zone. We have one in Africa. We have one in the South Pacific. What's the obstacle? There is one obstacle to eliminating all nuclear weapons in the Middle East, all nuclear weapons in the Middle East, to significantly diminish the threat to Israel. We have that option. Who's blocked it? Who has refused? Iran has gone along with it. All the other Middle Eastern states have gone along with it. Only one state, the one who pretends to be for peace and for security, which has opposed the weapons of mass destruction free zone in the Middle East. That's Israel. Iran is a signatory to the Non-Proliferation Treaty. Is Israel a signatory to the Non-Proliferation Treaty? In fact,
Piers,
In
is he
fact,
going to answer questions or just freewheel all day long? Like, I answer your questions.
Okay,
I
so
don't
now,
sit here and
Brad,
just pontificate. You ask me a question.
You can go to 936, which is where the nuclear thing comes up again.
Netanyahu directly many times. I asked Naftali Bennett, the former prime minister, last week. Nobody ever wants to give a straight answer. So let me just ask you. You said you answer my questions. Does Israel have nuclear weapons? Yes or no?
Listen, as far as I know, and as you know, not the prime minister, not even close to it, way above my pay grade. But as far as I understand, Israel does possess significant capabilities. But officially, Israel says it maintains this policy of ambiguity.
Why?
I think at this, I think at this stage, the organizations, enemies, and people who need to know, they know. And I'm specifically focusing on our enemies. And
yeah, but you understand why people like me look at it and go, hang on a sec. So you guys are all over Iran about their nuclear capability, and you want to have full transparency. You don't want anyone misleading anybody. And yet when it comes to your own nuclear weapons, you're about the first Israeli guest I've ever had, I think, who's openly said, yeah, we've got them. But the idea that your government can just not answer that question and is the only country in the world that doesn't give an answer to that question, why does Israel get a pass? I don't understand it.
Well, I think it's fundamentally different when you try to compare Iran and Israel. We aren't the ones.
Well, let me compare you to the UK. Why should the UK be open and transparent about its nuclear capability, but Israel get a pass? I don't understand why there's one rule for Israel and another rule for everybody else has got them.
But even more substantially, Piers, why should anybody have nuclear weapons?
But now you're peace doing. I mean, it's such a goalpost moving.
Yeah. Why does the UK have them? For what purpose? What does it serve France? What does it serve Russia, China, the US?
Well, obviously they have them as a deterrent, as I assume Israel does. But again,
there you go.
The French are open about it.
It's not a deterrent.
The British are open about it. The Americans are open about it.
Yeah.
The only country that isn't is Israel.
Okay, so speak on this, Sammy. Sam, sorry.
Yeah.
I gotta have Ralph Nader on. You gotta bring Ralph Nader on in exchange for that. Yeah. If I stop calling you Sammy,
Yeah, the history of this is really phenomenal. Israel's nuclear weapons have effectively been used. There's significant scholarship in 1973 when the Egypt and Syria, were actually doing, damage in the war then to Israel. That Israel basically demanded more supplies from the United States, stat, or else they would go nuclear. There's significant scholarship on that. John Steinbeck wrote a really fascinating paper, and other scholars have pointed that out. And Jonathan Pollard actually brags about this, if people have seen clips of that. So that's not a deterrent. That is ensuring complete dominance. And we also have to recall that this is all done in the context of the Middle East, and the U.S. is now on its second war, allegedly over weapons of mass destruction, right? That was the pretext for the Iraq war. Saddam Hussein was going to get WMDs, and we can't let the smoking gun be a mushroom cloud and all of that. That was the whole pretext for, or a huge part of the pretext for, the Iraq invasion. And now it's largely about Iran allegedly getting nukes. And this whole time, the U.S. and the Israeli governments are putting on this complete farce and not acknowledging that Israel has nuclear weapons. It's completely vacuous and preposterous, and it's such a an obvious complete con. What should happen is that there should be real scrutiny on Israel's nuclear weapons, so that Israel doesn't have the and I think that that's part of the reason that you see this capitulation with all of these Arab governments, right? I mean, there's massive corruption, and I'm the first person to speak up against the Gulf Sheikdoms and Jordan and Egypt and so on and so forth. But I think that they also assess that they all have a nuclear gun to their head, and so what's the point of fighting this?
Right. Well, Sam, you'll be interested. We have another video. Brad, did you get the latest? Yes, it's ready. So we have this other video, C09. And this is a recent video. And here it is. It's on Fox News. And Trump is going to criticize Netanyahu for doing something related to nuclear weapons. Let's take a listen.
That Iran will not have a nuclear weapon. There are reports now that Netanyahu is going to talk to you about ongoing excavation at Pickaxe Mountain, construction vehicles entering and exiting tunnels, paving new access roads. Satellite imagery and intel indicates that Iran is actively constructing and fortifying Pickaxe Mountain. How will we respond?
Well, I don't need Bibi to tell me that. Bibi's telling me that because he wants me to stay involved. I mean, I don't necessarily. We have the finest, because of Space Force, we have the greatest cameras in the world focused on. We know exactly what's going on. But no, I heard Bibi announce that. I said, why don't you just tell it to me? Why do you have to announce it to the world? I know exactly what's going on at Pickaxe. It's not a big problem. We took out their nuclear sites, and we'll have to take out Pickaxe if we don't make a deal. If we don't make a deal, we'll take it out very easily.
So there, you've come in kind of full circle. Not admitting his own nuclear powers, but of course exaggerating, lying, not just lying about not having the weapons, but here he is lying about Iran's nuclear weapons, which even Trump is like, okay, you don't need to tell me what's happening. Like, don't lie, just to try to get us enthralled in this. Yeah.
Yeah, it's. I mean, it's Trump, so the lies shift by the day.
Sure.
One minute he's destroyed everything, and the next minute we
Exactly.
got to act to do something. And the trigger for the entire attack on Iran, according to Rubio, was that Israel was going to attack if we didn't attack.
Right.
So there's substantial evidence that they're working hand in glove. I should, I'm happy to keep going down the nuclear hole here, because it's one of my favorite subjects, and done a lot of work on it. But I have to shift gears from being scrutinizing journalist to being competent campaigner.
Yes. Okay. Yeah.
So I should be saying people can be helping the campaign and contributing and volunteering at samhusseini.com. And I hope that people plug into that and to really mount a very serious challenge to the establishment that is going to continue to gloss over all of these issues, to just simply morph from different forms of empire and to corrode democracy, and to be working hand in glove with imperial Israel. And that affects our democracy in so many different ways. And obviously lots of other issues, taking on insurance companies, abolishing ICE, so many other issues to really get into. But I think that there is a unique opportunity the next couple of months to really wage as serious of a campaign here in Maryland, just outside of DC, against this establishment Democrat, Glenn Ivey.
And do you have a little bit more time to talk about your campaign?
Sure.
Okay, but I'm glad we interjected that. We should cut those in. Okay, so here are the options for what to talk about next. Hannibal Directive, or taking a look at your getting thrown out of a meeting with Trump and Putin, or also want to ask you about the new party from the new political alignment from Joe Kent, Tucker Carlson, Marjorie Taylor Greene, and Thomas Massie, announcing that they're trying to build a new political movement, possibly as a third party. And we can show, if you're picking that button, we have the tweet that goes with that. So which would you like to go with?
It's like door number 1, 2, or 3.
I know, exactly.
Really whatever you want to do, Katie. But yeah, sure.
Okay,
we can do that.
Okay, and people know the Hannibal Directive is basically the call to kill hostages, whether they're civilian or soldiers, right? When being taken away to prevent having to exchange them. It was such a great show. Okay, guys, so you are so in luck. If you've seen this whole thing, you got to see this whole thing for free. If you're watching this later, some of this will be Patreon only for a bit. And you're going to really love that Patreon only part. We can talk about what that is, but it's definitely going to be some spicy stuff. I can guarantee it'll be spicy stuff with Sam Husseini. Oh, maybe we can have that as a segment, Brad. What do you think? Spicy stuff with Sam? Sam spicy stuff? That sounds a little no, we don't want it to make it. Anyway, whatever. We'll figure it out.
I was just thinking I could make like a mock-up of like a hot sauce bottle that has like spicy in it, but then it would be like Sam's spicy something or other, like extra spicy.
Yeah. What could we say? We have to think of a good word that starts with S so we can be alliterative. But I think this was a great show. If you want to see the full thing, and it has some great, really good things about Israel's nukes, then you can find that at patreon.com/The Katie Halper Show, and also Israel's Hannibal Directive, and also like Sammy. Sorry, that's what what's his name? Ralph Nader calls him. Sam's getting attacked at yet another venue. Then you can find that all at patreon.com/The Katie Halper Show. Oh, this is so nice. Go Katie, thank you for keeping us informed at such an intense pace. Sweet and uncompromising interviews. Oh, that's so nice. It's IE, but I don't care. I always just find it funny because you see my name right in front of you. It sounds like I'm being passive aggressive, and I do care, but I don't. But it is funny because I'm always like, they see me right there. Anyway, I don't care. Spell my name however you want, as long as you. Oh, that's funny. What is it? I don't care what you say about me, as long as you spell my name right. I'm the opposite. I don't care if you spell my name right. Just say something nice about me, like I'm sweet and uncompromising, whatever. All right, Brad. What else do we have to say?
I'll just reiterate to people, if they wanted to learn more about Sam's campaign or to help support him. The website's down there at the bottom of the screen. There's the website, and
Yeah, this is a great show. And next week we'll be back to our regularly scheduled schedule. And that would be Tuesdays at 7 p.m. and Fridays at 12 noon. But we did accommodate Khanna. We had to move that around a bunch, and then we had to move it from a 30-minute to a 15-minute. But
you did do mission accomplished regarding what we were talking about before we began today about your own personal record of
it's true.
From start to, I think, what was it? I think you got it done in about 45 seconds.
Yes. And so that means I did kind of forget to make some reminders, which is that if you're watching, please give it a thumbs up. We need to get, our next goal is getting to what? 375,000. Wait, what are we up to? No, are we over 4? What are we at?
We are currently at 466.
Oh my God. So our next goal, is 475,000. Thank you. I still don't know where my trophy is, YouTube, or it's plaque coming. Or whatever. It's coming. It's probably here at my parents' place. And we're at 466. So we got to get to, we have 9K to go. Also become a patron if you can at patreon.com/The Katie Halper Show. Again, that's patreon.com/The Katie Halper Show. If you can afford to pay $5 a month, that is amazing. And you get extra content, exclusive content, early release, behind the scenes stuff. And if you can't do that though, and you want to keep supporting the show, you can do that at $1 a month, so literally $12 a year. And you do that at patreon.com/The Katie Halper Show. If you are more into YouTube, you can go to youtube.com/The Katie Halper Show, and then you subscribe, and then you can join. And Brad liked the way I put that last week. Sorry, I'm not going to do it as well this time. Brad is so nice. He's like, not that the other times that you do weren't good. I don't want to take away from but this is, so if you are agnostic and you're like, hey, I could join the Patreon or I could join YouTube, then we would ask you to please join Patreon, because that is a place that lets you keep more of the money than YouTube does. And that, again, is patreon.com/The Katie Halper Show. But if you're really into YouTube memberships, you can do that by by subscribing and then joining. And I think that's all we have to say. Oh, and Abdul El Sayed did get the Katie Halper Show bump. So hopefully Sam will get that as well. Yeah, we can do a list of all the bumps.
Amongst other things on Patreon, you get some of the weird things that I come up with. Like,
look at that.
Like that meme right there.
That's great. That is really good. Yeah, Brad, you got to do a monthly. How about you do a monthly art piece for Patreons? That's a lot of work. Only if it takes you not too long. The thing is, you would do them anyway, so I don't feel bad asking.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, yeah. I think that would be a good idea. And we need to do like an AMA.
Yes, we're going to start a monthly AMA, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, when you want to kick off our first one.
Or maybe there would be an AMA with an asterisk.
Oh, yeah. No, it's an AMS. Ask me something. Oh, salsa with Sam, Mark wrote. And then let me just really quickly acknowledge my acknowledge the peas in a pod thanked or something. It's like literally the symbol for peas. Thank you, Quadomatic. Thank you, Sasha, and thank you, Skelts. Really appreciate it. And of course, thank you all the and we got another super sticker. Thank you, Truth Above All. Thank you for that super chat, super sticker, super chat. And thank you, Abe 158 for that super chat. And also thank you to the people who became members this show, and that would be Erox Rogers and
to anybody asking, did the stream freeze right before the end, or if I've fallen behind? As far as I can tell, yeah, I have not seen that happen. I'm sorry. So it might just be on your end.
Yeah. Awesome. Okay. Well, thanks everyone, and see you Tuesday. Thank you to the guests. Thank you, Brad. Thank you, Nate. And thank you, Phantom Fanta, for the clips. Bye, everyone.
I did everything right and they indicted me. And I don't know what the I'm doing. Antifa!